Well, welcome everybody to another edition of our Life West Leadership Line. I'm Dr. Ron Oberstein, your host, and I am so excited to have our guest today. We've been friends for many years, and she is a wonderful chiropractor, a wonderful educator, but more importantly than that, a wonderful person. And I have with us today Dr. Janice Hughes. Welcome, Janice.
Thanks. And maybe we shouldn't talk about how many years we've known each other.
Well, we don't have to go into that detail, but I do want to let our group know, let our audience know that, Dr. Janice has a long history in chiropractic. She graduated actually from CMCC in 1990. She's very principled. She's very salutogenic and vitalistic. She practiced in Brantford, Ontario, which is the home of
Wayne Gretzky.
The great one. She practiced there for years, and then she moved to Palmer College actually in 2003, and helped set up a business institute at Palmer. And then from there she went to Boulder, Colorado, and after Boulder, Colorado, which was just this last year, you just moved just recently, right?
Right.
She's in Penticton, British Columbia for our Canadian cohorts. You'll all know where that is. It's about 3 to 4 hours west of Vancouver. She just above the U.S. border, and she's just been doing amazing things. So she's an author. She wrote 2 books. Actually, she wrote her first book that she wrote was Inspired Wealth. And today, is it today the launch?
Yesterday. Yep.
Oh, yesterday. Just launched a book called Codes of Longevity. And just doing amazing things in business, and amazing. You were phenomenal when you spoke to our students. So let's dive in and let's start talking about about what you want to share today with our audience.
Sure. I love it.
I think a great way to start, Janice, is let's just talk about business principles. I mean, this is what you teach all over the world, right? So let's talk about it. Business principles in chiropractic.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people say to me, why? Why am I talking about that these days? And, after, again, you and I talking about being really principled chiropractors, I spent a phase of my career after practice coaching thousands of chiropractors. And obviously, that's where I started into some of the business principles, but it was sort of when I left chiropractic, worked in a biotech, building a biotech. And then as I've come back to chiropractic, really trying to share, those principles, those concepts, because that's ultimately what's so imperative for chiropractors. Doesn't matter what phase of the world, what's happening in the world, understanding those business principles, it just helps you grow. And more importantly, if we go back to the philosophy, it helps you have more impact.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you talked about working in biotech or working in that world, which is, we're talking about $1 billion, industry. And I know you were doing fundraising and you were doing all kinds of things, and it's kind of like being on the beach, with all that sand, and like chiropractic is this, not a pebble, but it's it's just a small part of that, right? And you you kind of ventured off into this gigantic world, right? And what were the principles that you picked up? Like, what did you see, and what are you relating now, to our profession?
Well, you're so right that it's such a huge field. We would, in the very beginning as a small biotech, we would go into places like, one of the first places that I was fundraising was down on Wall Street. And, in a room with venture capitalists, private equity people, you have 8 minutes to present about who you are, your company, why would they invest in you? Now, number one, we really didn't want VC money, but we needed to cut our teeth and talk about our uniqueness. And that's what was so interesting. In a young biotech, when you're going up against hundreds and hundreds of ideas and technology, and particularly that a lot of them were coming out, it was more device industry, and we were more conceptual and still in early development. So it forced us, I was used to speaking all over the world and to chiropractors and organizations, and to now say, wait a minute, this isn't even a TED Talk. This is about a 3-minute pitch. Because 8 minutes, your time starts when the clicker goes, and half the time the other people aren't even organized or listening yet. So your 8 minutes goes pretty fast.
Right.
So
we're using this elevator talk, right? You know, that we've always talked about in chiropractic. If you're in an elevator with someone, how would you explain chiropractic? Which, you know, to get up to the 25th floor might be 2 minutes, right?
Yes.
But you're talking to venture capitalists and people who are like, you know, wealth-oriented people, seeing people continually. That's incredible.
Yeah.
8 minutes.
To put it in perspective, you know, like so for the biotech, you know, we've raised basically to keep ourselves private, you know, by this point, we're probably nearing $200 million for the project. Now, remember, back then we were at ground zero, but you're looking for millions of dollars in really, really, really quick period of time. But it's so interesting because that's that business principle of what makes us very unique. You know, chiropractors tend to, I hate to say it, but we've all had that conversation where somebody goes, oh yeah, I know a chiropractor, or, you know, I know chiropractic, you know, oh, my back, you know, those kinds of things that if we're not careful, everybody gets lumped into the same pool, for lack of better words. So business principle, I think for a long time people said, well, only after you have experience can you talk about your niche. I completely disagree. You know, you can take it. You want your funnel of potential clients to be huge, but they're more attracted to you the more unique you are.
Yeah.
So it's really that business clarifying point about, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
You know, and who do you love to work with? Because that general message, you know, that's not what the public's looking for anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, and then that brings us to like what your intention is and where your attention goes, right? So intention and attention, right?
Right.
You know, and so when you took these principles from, you know, from the biotech, or, you know, from that world, right, and brought them into chiropractic as you're lecturing and you're writing these books and you're doing these things, you know, and you talk about having your attention, right? How do you work with people? Like, what are the basic skills, or the basic, you know, I know it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you're there, you know, but what do you share with people? You know, what are some of the golden nuggets that are there?
You know, it's actually really boring. It's not rocket science, you know, and we have so many incredible coaches and companies in the profession that are all helping people. It's not like, oh, one is right and another's wrong, you know, so the first principle really is, what are your systems? You know, how do you, so if you really get your uniqueness, or you really understand the message that you're trying to bring, or in your community, well, then what are your systems? And so you notice that it doesn't matter whether, you know, which company people have been coached or guided by, you know, it's just that any principles, you need a good system to reproduce it. Right. You know, way back in the very beginning, I ran a personality-driven practice. I tease everybody that the things I talk about now are because I made all the mistakes. You know, mine was personality-driven. I needed help and guidance way back when we first met all those years ago, you know, in a certain company, that, you know, we needed those guidance and parameters to help us build structure. Yeah. You know, so understanding that it's the structure, and then it's really a lot of your own personal discipline and success principles. You know, success leaves clues. Yeah. But then it's finding someone to help hold you accountable for that, or to help you create that. Because we can all say it, you know, and I think one thing that the pandemic, that we don't even really want to even talk about anymore, that it really reinforced to me, I've had to go back to some really, I'll call it principles that I got a little loose on, you know, personal, you know, discipline, or even nutrition, you know, because let's face it, like at first, as everything's in lockdown, you know, it's not like almost, you know, for me, it was like, oh, comfort food and things like that. So, you know, it's not sexy, Dr. Ron. It's tried and true business and success principles.
Yeah. So when you talk about, I love what you said, and you're so true. It's so true. I mean, you know, most of us, during the COVID time, especially when it first hit, we're so consumed with the outside world coming in. And then we had in the States, at least, we had the election, we had all this stuff, and we were so inundated that it's so easy to be in a sailboat and have a few storms hitting and forget where you're going.
Yeah,
right?
completely.
You get blown off course. Then you end up just going wherever the storm takes you, and you succumb to it instead of holding your ground, being disciplined, like you said, and say, nope, here's where we're going, and not close out that, but compartmentalize it on some level, right?
Yeah, and almost close it out.
Yeah.
I went back to way back years ago. If I look at where I grew the most in practice, I had a coach that had me to be so disciplined with no news, no technology, no, distractions. And, and again, when I say no, I mean really minimal. Like, are you going to schedule, these days, I basically go and check social media twice a day, and I have a 10-minute window. And I got so off of that at the beginning of this pandemic, with all the ridiculousness and what was really going on. And again, like, who again is publishing like any truth, because we all know it. We as chiropractors know this is absolutely over and extreme. Now, I'm not denying that there's some very sick people with all of this, but we know, let's get back to the business of what do we do? And so from my perspective, chiropractors should be the number one public health resource.
Yeah.
Why are we not?
Yeah.
We aren't. Like, we are not even being considered, or everybody's Facebooks are being blocked because of some of the things that are being said. So what or how as a profession do we take that right position, our position? I language it that the best defense against COVID is a powerful health offense.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah,
and that's who we are. And so for all of your listeners, let's get to the business of that again.
Yeah.
Like, let's be those experts. Let's be the one at the table. Yeah. You mentioned the book, The Codes of Longevity. That's a whole group of practitioners that are tapping in to what I'm going to tell you is the biggest booming industry out there. And chiropractic needs to be a really key part of that conversation. For all of you listening, we already have 1 billion people on the planet are in retirement. So what do those people that are in retirement want? They want health and well-being and longevity.
Yeah.
Well, everything I'm talking about is chiropractic. It's our principles.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting too. We've been saying this. I mean, if you remember back in like in the 80s, early 90s, Megatrends was a book, right?
Yes.
And it talked about high tech and high touch. This is where we're going to, right? And we are there. I mean, they were exactly right. The two gentlemen who wrote that book, right? High tech is everywhere now, right? And people are sitting at home. There's at computers all day, and they're missing that touch that we have, right? That we work with, along with what the power of the adjustment and what we do along with that touch, so to speak. It's interesting, Janice, in your estimation, right? I'm just going to kind of throw something out hypothetically. If we took the profession of chiropractic, right, the whole ball of wax, got it, everything, every aspect of it, and went out to a firm outside of our profession and said, what do we need to do to have everybody know our message? Right? Like the reason why we haven't been there, right, is because we have we're so disjointed. Dentistry is very simple, right?
Right.
Dental hygiene, right? And they put a message out years ago, to have your teeth checked, twice a year, right? And if you have problems, then you get it taken care of. Where, with me and my wife, we would go 4 times. They said twice a year. We would go 4 times a year to get our teeth cleaned.
Overachievers.
Yeah, well, I would just say, like, well, what's the magic in 6 months? Like, what if I went every 4?
Yeah.
We'll probably have to do less. It would be better for me or not? They go, well, of course it'd be better for you. I go, then let's schedule every 4 months. I could have done it every 2 months. I'm sorry, every 3 months. But I could have done it every 2 months or month and a half. But I just, I didn't want to spend that much time in the dental chair. And that's probably me. But it's like, what would they say, like out in the VC world or out anywhere else, as you were doing these pitches, what would they say, if we were to go there,
Well, they, sitting at round tables, they used to, again, talk about, oh, you guys as chiropractors, first of all, they were saying it in a pretty negative way. Like, how did you guys figure this out when we were talking about our project? You guys are just chiropractors. So besides the fact that I had to get over being ready to kill them, we would ask a lot of that. And, from that outside business perspective, we do not have a lasered in description. And I just tested it a lot, and I go back to in practice, I used to say to people, I'm not a bone doctor. Yeah. I'm a nervous system specialist. Yeah. How you live your life is through your nervous system. Everything you taste, touch, smell, think, and do comes, and it's about the brain, spinal, and nerves. And so that's even all those years ago, the way I was trying to learn to talk about the fact that your brain is everything now. AI, they're trying to mimic brain, and all the technology is about how can they simulate some of the things that go on in the human brain. For us as a profession, to even be part of those conversations, some of them were saying to me, why doesn't anyone know that? Yeah. Why don't people know that an adjustment maximizes your neurology, your body's adaptability? I go back to, I'm a philosophy diplomate. I did with Fred Barge. I was, one of the first graduating classes of the diplomate. And like literally understanding that that's it. That's what we do. And opening up to the fact that I work with people, and I know chiropractors that do every technology, every type of adjusting, all these different techniques. And guess what? Everyone works.
That's right.
Everyone works equally. Now, for you, you may love a certain art. That's our art. Chiropractic, if we want to talk about the triune, I believe is a philosophy, art, and science. And the philosophy is this vitalism, this neurology. The art is then how you deliver that. And I hate to say it, but part of the science is not just about what goes on in the nervous system. Science is a system, and your business is a system. Yeah. So, that's, for me, that's how I like to describe it now. And I've had a number of those. So we're still private, completely private. And we have our investors, we have a lot of private equity individuals, people who are from VC, companies, but we don't have any company ownership. And so it's interesting that as we have those conversations, they keep saying to me, why don't you put that message out to the public?
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at that, and it would be wonderful. I mean, I had Dee Umber on the Life Leadership line.
Yes.
Dee's in his 80s, and he's been out for, graduated in 1956. And the one thing he said that still sits with me today, he said, I had hoped by this time that the public would understand what chiropractors do and what chiropractic is. Just have that message. How you apply it, that's the beauty about what we have in chiropractic.
That's right.
The art, it all works, right? And if you're doing functional neurology, or you're doing, Blair technique, upper cervical, or you're doing Gonstead, whatever, that's just the tech, that's the art of what we do, right? And it's so true. But I think going back to what you said earlier was that in individual practice, right? Now we're not talking about the profession, right, but individual practice. It's really honing in on what I heard you say was that unique factor, right? And what your messaging is, correct? And when we look at that, it's kind of like quantifying your life, right? It's not just about your practice per se, right? There's more to it, correct?
Right. On that quantum level, I'd like to say that if you want to double your business, triple your own learning, triple your own growth. Grow you. That's why when we were talking about business building principles, like, it's not sexy, it's really tried and true discipline, components. And a piece of that is self-discipline, self-growth, and understanding, digging in with someone to understand, who you are, because the more you do that and share that through your business, it's incredible to see the impact.
Yeah. When I used to coach, we used to call that the quantum and then the mechanical, right? And they're both good. They're both great, but the mechanical is, okay, this is procedures, this is what you can do, whatever worked for them in their office and how they did it. And, how can they be able to work out so they can see more people, all that kind of stuff, with that, whatever they chose to do, right? To have their dreams come true, because everyone's different. That's the mechanical part. But the quantum is what drives that. The quantum is, like you just talked about, like, what are you doing as a person to grow? How disciplined are you in your life, right? If you want your patients to be disciplined, then, I need to be disciplined, right?
Yeah.
Right. What am I thinking? What am I putting into my head? Who am I hanging out with, right? Like you talked about, success leaves clues. You said
absolutely.
That earlier, Yeah. That quantum is something that few people grasp onto. I shouldn't say few, but not as many grasp onto, thinking that the mechanical is just going to take them there, and then they wonder what happens, right?
We spend so much time in our profession in our technique clubs, so even as students, we're in our technique clubs, or we're in our technique groups, and honing our art. Fabulous. That's wonderful, as long as that is fueling you and growing you as an individual, not that you're excluding that. And so if we even spend a tenth of the time on growing our mind, ourselves, who, we are. And that's why I like things like, continuing, even studying, some of the functional neurology component. My husband's a chiropractor, and just this year used the pandemic time to not only study the functional neurology, but sit for a fellowship in functional neurology. And after, 32, 33 years in practice, it's not, oh, wow, he has to do that, but that is completely transforming some of the work that he's even doing. And that's after all these years. So I think it's really important to, to continue to say, how do we grow ourselves?
Yeah. And I think the other part about that is, and I agree with you 100%, is you're never too old to learn, right? I mean, we keep doing the same thing. It doesn't mean you change your technique, but we keep coming from the same spot without evolving, whether it's consciously or subconsciously or quantumly, whatever you want to call it. We'll keep getting the same result,
Right.
And if you love your result, then that's great, but we still want to grow ourselves as people. And I think what I'm hearing you say is,
even if we love our result, if you don't continue growth, you'll stop getting the result doing the same things.
Yeah.
That's, I think, people need to understand. If you're not growing, it's actually like you're shrinking.
Yeah.
A mentor of mine said that if you're, green, you're growing, and if you're ripe, you rot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways of looking at it, but even just to stay where you are, it's imperative that we grow.
But it's a universal principle too, right? You're either in expansion or contraction. You're never just at that one spot.
Right.
Right. It's funny because there was an old analogy about pushing a boulder, like you go to push a boulder up a hill and you got to get behind it. Oh man, it takes all the energy in the world. And then not even uphill, just going straight. And then you get it going and then, you're pushing it like this, right? And then you're pushing it like this because it has momentum. And then you're pushing it like this. And at this point, most people take their finger off.
Yes.
And it still rolls. So going back to what you said, it still rolls, but at some point it stops. And then you go back to do this and it doesn't work. You go back to do this, it doesn't work. You go back to do this, and then you got to get back behind
all over again.
It's the same thing. It's so amazing, And I think the beauty of what you're talking about is that if we grow our life, right? If we grow who we are, everything around us will be affected and impacted by that. And that's, our practice. And that's the goods that we deliver. We will be better at our technique. We'd be better at our philosophy, everything, right? If we're just having that growth within and having that congruency, because I don't know, chiropractic to me is part of who I am, right? You know,
That's right.
that old saying, Janice, are you in chiropractic or is chiropractic in you, right? You know,
Completely.
It's just amazing. Well, let me ask you a question because we're gonna wrap up. And I just love talking to you. So thank you. Because there's just, for our listeners, just watch this video and, you know, this leadership line, and do it like at nighttime when it's quiet, you know, and just, or early in the morning when you wake up, you know, because there's a lot that's in here. The last thing I wanted to ask you is this, you know, where do you see our profession going? You know, like being one person who's in the forefront, you're out there lecturing, you're out there teaching business strategies and doing all kinds of things, and been on every end of chiropractic institutionally you were part of. Where do you see us going?
I believe that we are the number one profession for public health. Now you can see that we've got a big gap, you know, from what the world sees to what you or I talk about. Yeah. You know, I think that's exciting. You know, how do we move there? How do we pivot into that? You know, and everything we're talking about, you know, we need more chiropractors living a happy, joyful life, thriving in practice. You know, one of the things I've been doing in a number of the women's groups is saying, how can I help create more chiropractic multimillionaires? Yeah. Because if we have that money, if we have the business, if we have the stability, we'll just go out and do that. It's just the fears or, wait a minute, I can't leave a day of practice, you know, or I can't put money into these things. So, you know, I'm really excited. I see we have this, again, really important piece, this gap, and I like looking for those gaps. I see where I want us to go. And so that longevity piece is even an example. Like, just think about the opportunity. If we as leadership are in those conversations, think about the public and the beginning. Like, I'm like, Dee Dee, we're never going to get to where we really think it needs to go, you know, but even if we could get a little further, you know, that's going to also financially help a lot of chiropractors.
Yes, absolutely. And the public.
Completely. That's ultimately what it's about. Like, remember, you know, one of the best offensive, you know, pieces is this health. Well, who better than chiropractors to play that role?
Yes. I love it. Well, Dr. Janice Hughes, thank you so much for being on the Life West Leadership Line. I just so appreciate you. I can't wait to see you again in person. You know,
likewise.
We were together last January, almost a year, right? When you were at the college and you spoke to the students, and you worked with our business institute. So thank you for all that you do for the profession, all that you do for the niches that you target. Also, you know, the women in chiropractic, which it's so needed, stepping up, you know, for that, and for everything that you and your husband have done to enhance our profession and push us forward. I so appreciate it.
Well, likewise, thanks for the great conversation today.
You're welcome. And to our actually, any last things you'd like to share?
No, I think we've said it all.
Covered? Perfect. I think we did too. So to our Life West Leadership Line viewers, thank you so much for checking in with us today. We'll have more leadership lines coming to you. Please re-listen to this, because there's a lot in there that you can uncover and be able to take and utilize in your life. And just know that we love and appreciate you, that we stay safe, keep loving those people around you, live your life from above down, inside out, and just trust the process, because the process works when we're right in it, right? So thank you. And until our next leadership line, I'll bid you adieu, and I'll see you next time.